All right, today we're going to talk about proper techniques for hair pulling during sex. You're going to learn how to properly pull somebody's hair to make it a pleasurable experience rather than a painful one. I'm Brandon the Dom. Let's dive in. Hair pulling is a relatively simple and widely used activity in sex and BDSM scenes. It's often considered entry level because it's pretty straightforward and doesn't require a lot of explanation. And while yes, it only requires your hand and their hair, doing it correctly can be the difference between driving your partner into lust and really hurting them, not in the fun, sexy way. First, let's talk about why people even enjoy hair pulling. The reasons that you might enjoy hair pulling might be different for you. Here are some common reasons. First is physical sensation. So your scalp has tons of little nerve endings. In fact, there can be anywhere between 2 and 20 nerve endings in one hair follicle, which are all going to be stimulated when the hair is pulled. And pulling large amounts of hair can be stimulating to the entire scalp, kind of like getting a scalp massage. There's also the thrill of losing control. Because the hair is connected to the head, when you're pulling that around, the person that's hair is being pulled has no choice but to follow the direction that you pull. Otherwise, if they try and fight it, they're going to experience a lot of pain. This also means that their attention must be directed wherever that other person directs it to. And that loss of control can be very freeing. It can also bring up some primalness, particularly during rough sex and in the middle of that lust. Having the hair pulled behind from the back of the head can kind of feel like a lion, biting on the back of a lioness's head. And of course, it's an expression of dominance and submission. Pulling the submissive's hair can be an expression of dominance, allowing the dom to have power over her physically and just reinforcing that dynamic. Now let's talk about how to pull hair. First, we're going to address the risks. Yes, hair pulling is relatively simple and the risks are pretty low to incorporate it into your sessions, but it's not to say there are none entirely. So here's some risks to be aware of. The first is breaking your hair. If you don't pull from the root near the scalp of the hair and instead pull out in the middle or towards the end, you increase the likelihood of damaging the hair or breaking the follicles. Another risk is pulling out hair. So if you only grab a little bit of hair and pull on it, you're more likely to actually pull the hair out of the head, where if you're grabbing a lot of hair and pulling on it, you're less likely to do that. You also have the risk of some sort of neck injury. So if you're drawing her around and pulling too quickly, you can risk straining the neck. And if you're pulling the hair backwards, so that lifts the neck up, and particularly if you're doing something very jarring, like doggy style and pulling from behind, you can strain and injure the muscles in the front of the neck. So now let's talk about where to pull the hair. The easiest and best way to grab someone's hair is from the back of the head near the base of the skull. So if this is the back of my head, I'm running my hand up near the base, trying to grab as much hair near the scalp and grabbing there. That's going to give me the most control. So I'll turn my head to the side and show you. So if this is the back of the person's head, running my hand up into the hair, if they have a ponytail like this, you can grab underneath the ponytail, or you can grab the ponytail, but you're grabbing the back of that head. And with that in mind, let's talk about some techniques. So I'm going to run through a variety of them and positions that you can use these in to incorporate in your play. This is far from an exhaustive list, but it's the ones that are going to come up most during your play. So the basic hair pulling technique is what I sort of already showed you, but you can be facing your partner and then taking your hand behind the back of their head and grasping there. Placing your palm on the back of your partner's neck and running your hand up into their hair, putting hair strands in between each of your fingers so you get a good grasp. And when you reach that middle part of their head near the base of their skull and generally level with their eyes, so be right here, gently curl your fingers into a fist so that you have a good grasp of hair. And despite it being called hair pulling, you don't actually have to pull the hair that much to gain control. In fact, just a little bit of pull is already going to be stimulating that scalp a lot. And from there, you can lightly increase the sensation by lightly pulling away from the head. Not ripping out, but just a light tug. And I promise that it's not going to take that much to get her to move where you want. The next technique is using their ponytail. So you can do that same basic technique and running in between their scalp and the ponytail like I showed you when I was showing you where to pull. However, the second thing that you can do is basically take your hand and wrap their ponytail in your fist like this and grabbing that hair tie and then pulling around. You can see that I have control of the head by only grabbing the ponytail. And here you're not really pulling in this position, like you're not pulling the ponytail backwards or out, but instead you're just kind of moving it around. And the reason is because you don't actually have the hair by the root. If you're going to be pulling like that, you want to be as close to the scalp as possible. Similar to ponytails, if they have pigtails on the side of their head, you can also grab those down by where the tie actually is, closer to the scalp, not at the ends, but close to the head. However, you want to be more careful and use less force than if it was a ponytail. And this is for two reasons. One, you're now grabbing towards the side and top of their head, which are going to be more sensitive than the back of the head. And that's going to be prone to actually hurting more if you're pulling. And you're also grabbing a less surface area of hair than you did with the ponytail. The ponytail has much more of the hair and grasp, where the pigtails only have half the hair, if that. You can also grab from the side of their head. Now, this is less advised for the same reasons that I just talked about with the ponytails of having less surface area, grabbing less hair. But if you do grab the side of the head, then you're going to basically want to grab and kind of loop some hair up. And you're not even going to pull here. This is just more of like, oh shit, he's got the side of my head type feeling. The other way that you can grab their hair is from behind. So instead of being in front of them and grabbing around their head, you're going to be grabbing their hair while they're in front of you. As I mentioned before, it's not really great to be pulling your partner's hair during doggy style and cranking their neck backwards, extending the forward of their neck as you're thrusting, because that can put a lot of strain on the neck. So instead of grabbing the hair and pulling backwards, like pulling towards you, or it's going to be straining that neck, it's actually better to grab towards the base of the hair and actually push up a little bit. So you're kind of like lifting the back of the hair, and you're basically lifting parallel to their head rather than lifting backwards. What this basically does is pull their head in line with their spine instead of cranking it backwards. It's a similar sensation. They're still getting their hair pulled, but it's a lot safer. Another thing that I'll do sometimes is grab a fistful of hair and push their head into the bed rather than pulling. You can also pull their hair and have them come in for a kiss. So this basically takes that same basic hair pulling technique where you have your hand behind their head and grasping near their scalp, but then you basically slightly turn their head towards you in order to go in for a kiss, or slightly bending their head so it reveals their neck, and then you can go in to kiss and nibble on their neck. I tend to do this also when they're giving me a blowjob. So I will grab the back of their hair and pull them off my cock in order to give them a kiss and then control and put them back. Hair pulling can also be used during face fucking. So grabbing a fistful of hair and kind of like wrapping it into your fingers rather than just putting your hand on the back of their head makes it far easier for you to have control while you're thrusting. You have a lot better control of the speed and how vigorous you're doing it. And depending on how vigorous you're going, you can actually use two hands, grabbing a lot of hair and having full and ultimate control. You can also drag them by the hair. And I don't recommend doing this often or if ever at all, because it's going to hurt no matter how it's done. But for some intense scenes, this may be exactly what you want. And in that case, you're going to grab as much hair as you possibly can in your hand towards the base, as close to the scalp as you can get. That's going to help minimize the damage. And as you pull that person away, you're not actually going to be like dragging them full body weight. They're not supporting at all. More likely, they're going to be moving with that on their hands and knees and using those to support them, because it would be far too painful for them to actually have their full body weight being pulled with their hair. Now let's talk about some tips for actually putting this into practice. Before you start engaging in hair pulling, remember what your goal for the scene actually is. Are you hair pulling to create a very intense moment and show her exactly who's in control? Or are you trying to have a sensual moment, turning all those nerve endings on top of your partner's head and trying to bring them greater sensual pleasure? Whatever it is, just because hair pulling is simple doesn't mean it can't be a great tool to bring whatever intensity to the scene that you want. And this kind of brings me to my next tip, which is hair pulling can be both sensual or it can be rough. If you want something more intense and rough, you're going to be quick in your actions, pulling more hard and moving things around aggressively. However, you can also create a more sensual experience. You can still grab your partner's hair from the back of the head, but instead of pulling hard, you're just going to lightly run your fingers through your partner's hair, running your fingertips along their scalp, giving them a nice scalp massage, and occasionally giving a light tug. Personally, I don't like to have my hair pulled, but I do like my partner doing a light tug and massage. Now let's talk about some tips for the submissive whose hair is being pulled. And the first tip is to move in the direction that your hair is being pulled. So when your dom has your hair in this position, you're pretty much at the mercy of his control unless you seriously want to hurt yourself by going against the grain. So don't fight it, just move in whatever direction that he moves you. My next tip, and this one is going to be actually very helpful for you guys, is considering whether to put your hair into a bun versus a ponytail. Of course, we would always like to play with an experienced partner, but sometimes that's just not the case. Putting your hair into a ponytail like this, where we have this long strand of things that we can grab onto, is going to make it much more likely that if your partner's inexperienced, they're going to reach out and grab that and use it like horse reins, which is not going to feel good for all the reasons that I just spoke about. Instead, what I recommend is thinking about putting it into a bun. So if I looped my hair up, having a bun like this is actually much harder to pull outwards. And instead, I'm going to have to grab it with a fist in order to get any sort of actual control with that bun. And because of that, it's going to be a much closer grab to your scalp and feel a lot better than if they grabbed the end of your ponytail and used it like a horse rein. Of course, the best option is always to teach your partner how to properly pull your hair, but I know that's not always the easiest. So putting it in a bun rather than a ponytail is going to be your best bet. So now that you know how to properly pull hair, combine it with some other activities like spanking, choking, or manhandling, all of which I've created videos for and will leave links down in the description. You can also learn where to place hair pulling in a perfectly constructed scene that's going to increase a lot of pressure and create perfect moments of dominance. And I've created an article about creating scenes. I'll leave that in the description as well. Or you can just enjoy it for all the nice stimulation that happens on your head, having a nice scalp massage, whatever it may be, the choice is yours. But if you're interested in more dominant and rough sex type positions, here's a video that I did on manhandling. That's going to teach you how to move your woman around in the bedroom. That's safe and fun for both of you. So check that video out. And thank you so much for your time and attention.